Welcome everyone. Thank you for joining me for a live streaming chat with the lovely, the wonderful Virginia Hein. Just going to read a little bio about Virginia Hein. Virginia is from Los Angeles, California. She has worked as a concept and character designer for toys and entertainment, and as an art director and illustrator. She's an urban sketcher and a fine artist. Currently, she teaches drawing and design in Los Angeles and also enjoys teaching location sketching workshops. Her work has been included in exhibitions and several books about location sketching. Welcome, Virginia.
Thank you, Brenda. And hi, everyone. I'm really happy to be here to talk to you today. And as I'm going along and I'm going to be talking about some things, I just really welcome your questions. So don't hesitate, okay? That I love the conversation of questions. And there's no such thing as a dumb question, ever. So I enjoy that. So I'm talking today about the dance of line and color. And what do I mean by that? So we know that drawing with an ink line and watercolor is a really common way for urban sketchers to work. It's easy, it's portable, it's quick, and it's just the kind of thing that, you know, you see so many urban sketchers doing. But what I think is that the magic happens when you really understand the personality of line and the personality of color, and you let those two play very complementary roles. You don't try to make one follow the other. It's a dance in that, you know, with a dance, you might have one person leading traditionally, but you might also have someone else take the lead. So in some drawings, ink is the leader. Color might be more important in another drawing. So what I want to show you today is just some of the things that I've done to show different approaches to working with line and color. And usually I start with line. And so I think as we start to go into images, Brenda, I can talk a little bit more about what I mean by the personality of line and the personality of color. Okay, this is a super quick sketch that I did at Descanso Gardens, where I teach workshops. And I started with a Fude pen. And if anyone is not familiar with the Fude pen, I can talk a little bit about that. It's basically a line that it's easy to get an expressive line with a Fude pen. And I think that's such an important part of this, is to use a line that takes no prisoners. You know, you just go in there with confidence. If it's messy or if it's a little sketchier than you thought it was going to come out, you just go with it. Every line is made with intention. In other words, I'm not just scribbling away, but I just let it lie. So when we talk about line, you know, what are the things that line does well? You know, we use line, you know, to tell a story. It's a really quick way to get to what is it about. And line gives us direction. In other words, you've got verticals in this. The verticals tend to give us some kind of sense of structure. Not a lot of horizontals here, but you know, you have a little bit of suggestion of horizontal and vertical. That gives you something solid, even though it's loose and sketchy. Hopefully you get a sense of structure. It's suggested here. Right. Line is also really good for creating pattern and texture. So since I'm using a black line, where I'm seeing the darkest shadows, I'm suggesting at the top of it's not a pagoda, the pavilion, the gazebo. I'm kind of filling in some shadow areas. And I'm just suggesting, you know, what's the direction of the light. And for foliage, I really love letting color tell the bigger part of the story with foliage. And so pretty much where I see branches. So with the line, I'm just suggesting the branches that come up over the gazebo and just again down in the foreground, so that when I go to color, and in this case, this was a super quick demo. I used 3 colors. So there's a mixed yellow with a little green, there's a bluish green, kind of dulled down, and then that hot pink.
Right.
So each color, hopefully each color is doing something, right? And what it does to the drawing is, I hope that it brings it to life. In other words, I want you to see that I'm creating something different with the color. I'm bringing something different with the color than I did with the line.
Right.
You can see that as the colors are deeper, more muted, they kind of magically push the space back. It's kind of amazing when you do this and see, oh, that really works. You know, we've all been taught that certain colors recede, cool colors recede. It is true that what's light, bright, and warm does tend to come forward. So when I'm doing something like this, I can break it down into the simplest elements. It's almost like a fun experiment. I can see, oh, look what that does. You know, how much detail do I really need? So I'm trying to be kind of thoughtful with what am I going to add? So that's just a little introduction here to what I'm talking about. And I also like to, in a successful drawing, and I'm not always successful, but in a successful drawing, I leave a fair amount of white space. And that's especially important when I'm doing the line, because I really want to leave space for color to do its thing.
Right. Excellent. I'm madly working because I have somebody trying to get in on our call and they can't get in. So hopefully I'll get this sorted out.
Oh, I understand. That's the magic of Zoom.
Anyway, this is lovely. What is this one, Virginia?
Oh, maybe my favorite location in Los Angeles is Olvera Street, which is the oldest street in Los Angeles. And it's a pretty quiet street right now, but in a normal, especially a weekend day, this is what it looks like. It's pretty packed. And there's all these little shops that have looked exactly like that since my childhood. They sell different stuff than when I was a child for the most part, but those little shops have looked the same forever, and they're crammed with people. There are a few places that you can actually sit with a sketchbook and not, you know, people will be curious and look over your shoulder. But what I also want you to notice is that canopy of that golden yellow foliage. And so depending on the time of day, this was probably done in late afternoon. I'm sitting there and what's in the foreground is very busy. There's lots of story there. So I started with an ink line, which you'll see in a few minutes. And then again, this is maybe 4 colors at the most.
Wow.
So what I did, I actually was painting with a friend who, when I took my big brush and I whipped that foliage on there, he looked at me like I was out of my mind. But that's the fun, you know, is when you have the line story, the line is giving the general story that you want to get across. What, to me, you use color for is to bring the emotion, bring the mood. And so that's why you see a lot of shadow. And I'm using a lot of little brights in the details, because there's so many little crazy details. And there's always, how much do I include? That's always, you know, whenever we're sketching, that's an important part, right? Mm-hmm. So basically with shape and with color, I'm just trying to suggest the foliage and really make it kind of a background element, but also the way it seems to kind of create the mood in that marketplace.
Cool. It's beautiful. Lovely sketch. Really seems to have like a lot of energy, and I love the dark and light contrast. Really lovely.
Thank you.
Is yellow your favorite color?
Yes. I think it is. I mean, there's lots of colors that I love, but when it comes to painting, man, I reach for that yellow. So I guess it must be.
I have a comment for you from Nicola. And she says, I would love to tell Virginia that I am in love with her work. She may know that, maybe.
Oh, gosh, thank you. How kind of you. Glad to have you with us today.
So I'm not sure how to pronounce the last name. It's Nicola May Ray. I'm not sure if I'm saying it right. And I'm sorry, Nicola, if I said it wrong. Here we go. So this is your black and white of that one.
Right. So this is one where I thought, you know what, I'm just going to go for those darks. The interior of those little booths, you know, especially during that time of day, can be quite dark. So, you know, believe me, not every drawing that I do is a favorite, but this one kind of is, because some of the things that I teach and talk about, I managed to actually do here, which doesn't always happen. But I wanted to really create that feeling of depth in the interior. And also those people off to the right are very backlit, so they become silhouettes.
Right.
I always think a successful sketch creates a sense of depth, and having that guy standing there, you know, kind of pondering all that stuff. I don't know if he was going to actually buy anything or if he just was kind of fascinated by it, but he became my focal point, really. And so we're kind of with him. I like to think that when we bring people into a sketch, we can be participants with them in the scene. So for me, that's kind of what he is. He's the guy that's like, wow, look at all that stuff. So, you know, I just love the bustle of people there. And another thing I was trying to do is just very simply suggest depth with the pattern of the lights. So, you know, they occur in a very regular pattern. And so I was trying to be very mindful of the spacing of those little lights. And so before I did anything with foliage, I thought, I'm going to stop and I'm going to let that be the story. And I left the empty space on the left really to give a sense of balance. I think if you create a ton of depth and texture in a sketch, you want to be selective. So it's as if all that texture and stuff needs breathing space. So I tried to leave a lot of breathing space in this one.
Cool. I have a question here for you from Chris Van Stockham. Hi, Chris. Thanks for joining us. And she says, what shade or brand of yellow do you mostly use?
Okay, I use probably way more Daniel Smith than anything else, but I also use some Winsor Newton and some Holbein and occasionally some My Mary Blue. But of course, I love New Gamboge. I love Hansi Yellow Medium. I actually love the Winsor Newton Indian Yellow, which is very close to a Gamboge. And I love Quinacridone, Quinacridone Gold.
Yeah.
Also Nicolazzo Yellow I like. It's kind of like a counterpart to Quinacridone Gold. Quinacridone Gold is more warm, but it's pretty aggressive, but sort of equally aggressive, but a little more on the cool side is the Nicolazzo. So with foliage, I'll use a lot of that Nicolazzo, and just started recently using Aussie Gold. That's a new favorite. So yeah, I haven't really yellows.
You really do know your yellows. Wow.
I know my yellows, yes.
That's amazing. So this is done with the Fude bent nib. And
yes.
So, Carla is asking, what ink do you use in your Fude?
Oh, excellent question. I use Diatramentis, the black. I want to say document. I think it's the document black, but it's the one that is what we'd call. It's not 100% waterproof, but it's very water resistant.
Yes. And
I used Noodlers in the past, but I don't find it to be quite as water resistant. And I've also found it to clog a little bit more readily. But I've had really good luck with Diatramentis, and I've used several different colors of the document ink, but I most often use black.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay. And so Carla Haler is also asking, is there a brand of Fude that you like?
I have several. Most of the time I use a Sailor, you know, what they call the bamboo, because it's green.
Yeah.
But I also have a Confucius pen. I may have to run and get my pens if anybody wants to see them. I have my brushes and my paint, but I could run and get pens if somebody needs to see them. But yeah, the Sailor Fude, that if you're familiar with Fude pens, that's probably the most common, and it's a workhorse. I actually have several, and so that I can ink them up with black ink. And so hopefully if I'm out sketching, if I run out of one, I can jump to another one.
Wow. Super.
Yeah.
Cool. All right, let's click on to our next one. Okay, so this is the completed sketch.
Yes, right. So this is the one you were seeing that I took the picture of on site, but now hopefully, you know, after having seen the black and white drawing, hopefully now you're kind of saying, oh, okay, where did you use color? And hopefully you can see that I think actually the first color that I put in was the shadows. And typically, not always, but typically that is what I'll start with, is I like making a pattern of shadow. So usually I see a pattern of shadow. Light and shadow tend to fall in a pattern depending on the time of day. So that big pool of the blue, violet, gray at the bottom, to me, kind of balances the light at the top. So, you know, anytime I'm using a color like that, I try to say, well, where else do I see it? You know, I'm not just going to make it up, but where else do I see shadows? Right. And if I'm using a limited palette, it'll also be, okay, you're going to be that color. You know, I want to be true to the scene, but I also want a harmonious sketch at the end of the day. So I might intentionally throw in some crazy notes here and there, but in this one, I thought there's so much going on, I'm going to keep it simple. And if you know anything about Los Angeles, and you know that LA is for the LA Dodgers, and during baseball season especially, there's a lot of Dodger blue. So I resisted the temptation to come in with a lot of Dodger blue, because I really felt like, okay, I've got more of a warm story with that foliage and with the time of day. So I'm gonna just hold back on the Dodger blue and stay with just that suggestion of blue in the shadow. So there's always decisions. I mean, that's what we're doing that's fun and challenging. Sketching on location is all those decisions.
Right, right. Cool. So if anyone is just joining us, I want to let you know that you can ask Virginia a question by sending it to me, Brenda Murray. Find me on my Facebook page, and you can send a Facebook message to me, and I'll be happy to read it out loud to Virginia. Super. Shall we go on to the next one?
Sure.
Okay, I'll make it a bit bigger.
Okay, this is just a little sketch that, again, this is my favorite place to sketch in Los Angeles, Olvera Street. I've done lots of workshops there, and, you know, just when I want to sketch for myself. And there are enormous ficus trees in the plaza. And in the afternoon, you'll see cumbia dancing, and you'll just see tons of people just sitting and sitting in the plaza and enjoying the shade. And especially in summer, I mean, we're kind of semi-desert in Los Angeles, and it can get really warm. And these trees are they're literally an oasis. And so the reason I included this is just to talk about color choices. As you might imagine, if I had painted this at noon, or if I painted it in the morning, I'd have a completely different light situation.
Right.
But in the afternoon, the shadows get really deep. And so some of that texture, I absolutely can go crazy drawing texture in trees, might be my favorite subject. But I wanted to downplay that. And what I really wanted to do here was create a sense of the massive foliage. So where I'm painting in the color that's sort of a violet gray into the tree, it just comes down into the shadows, and it shadows the people. I decided, I at first thought about having the light pop, but I thought, no, that light fixture, I thought, no, I'm just gonna kind of suggest that, and I'm gonna push that back. Right. And again, I feel like if I had succumbed to the temptation to keep going and put in background and put in more color, I would lose the story.
Right.
And so that's part of a sketch for me is oh gosh, does it take practice? And
Yeah.
trust me, I still screw it up. You know, it's like, oh, you didn't need to go that far. Well, you know, you just move on. But really with experience, I think that's an important thing to learn is when you've said everything you really want to say about the scene or about the story, stop.
Right.
And
Right.
move on. Yeah.
I think that this sketch is really good example of the dance of line and color, because if you're looking at the black and white, you can see some suggestion of the foliage. But then it really comes out more with the dabs of color on the color side. Like you can really see how you did foliage in both ways with that line and with those dabs of color. It's really lovely. It's like an equal balance, really.
Thank you. And I think sometimes it is more of an equal balance. I think sometimes line can be the more important partner. I think sometimes it's not more important, but one leads, shall we say, and the other one follows, and then they can switch, and one can lead, the other can follow. One of the things, I'll show you my tools in a little bit, and what I have always discovered is that my brain works differently when I'm using a different tool. So when I'm holding a tool like the Fude pen, it defines, you know, it wants to make texture, it wants to tell the story. So you know, all those little linear elements do something very different than and again, it's a different way of thinking with that detail delineating tool. And then when I switch to painting, I generally start with a really big brush, or at least a good sized brush.
Yes.
Sometimes I will draw. In fact, in the demo that we'll show you today, there you can see I more than I even realized, you know, I like to draw a bit with the brush. But when I'm using a big blunt tool like a flat brush or the dagger brush, the brain works a little differently. Suddenly the shape thinking comes into play. So I think that's what's an opportunity, is to let both of those things do their own thing and tell different parts of the story.
Cool. Yeah, and I hope that we will talk about your brush because I saw an amazing brush. I think that's the dagger that you were using.
Yes.
I don't even own one, and but I was looking at it, I'm thinking, wow, she really knows her way around that dagger brush, and obviously I'm missing out on something.
Well, it's the brush version of a Fude pen now that I think about it, because it does allow for a variation.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm standing in Olvera Street here, and I'm looking across the street at our main train station. And so the train station has this is not a small building, it's a really big building, but look at the size of those palm trees. So, you know, as I look at this drawing, at the time I thought, oh, Virginia, your hand is really off today. You know, the drawing looks so crude, but you know, I thought, today that's my line. I always think you have to embrace the line that you have and just you keep drawing, and some days I personally have a little more control. Other days my hand just has its own ideas. So, but in this case, I'm establishing the verticals. I'm establishing some structure. And in the foreground, for me, standing there at Olvera Street, there was a big sweeping tree. And I thought, well, what if I just left a really big space for that tree? And so it's always an experiment. And so that's what I did in this case.
It looks to me very deliberate.
Well,
as soon as I looked at it, I thought, okay, she has left space. She knows what she's doing here.
Well, like I said, it's always an experiment. It could have fallen flat on its face. You never know.
So Chris Van Stockham is asking, do you put down the line work and color in one sitting, or do you add the color when back in the studio?
Oh, great question. I don't always do line and color in the same sitting. Usually I do, but in this case, I was preparing for workshops. So I actually went to Olvera Street, did a lot of line drawings, and came home and photographed them or scanned them. And in some cases, I'll just photograph it while I'm there. and then continue. I'm trying
Right.
to remember to take photos of things, but I do not continue working in the studio. I mean, once in a blue moon, I may add a little something or other, but no, the color is also done on site. And so that's what's interesting is, let's say I do the drawing in the morning, I may be looking at a particular color or light situation, and then by the afternoon, that can change dramatically. So
Yeah.
oftentimes I try to plan to be there at the same time of day.
Right.
So that what I'm thinking about, it will be more or less, depending on the weather, it'll be kind of the same thing the next day.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool. So should I click ahead?
Sure.
Ooh. Oh my gosh.
So this is the tree on the left, and I was happy with this one. I felt like, okay, this, and you have to try something to know if it's going to work actually, but I felt like, okay, now the wonky line just seems to be working with the color. It's not, looking quite so stark. But then do you notice what I added? There's a very important element to this that I added. So in this case, I came back and one of the things you see at Alvera Street always, all year long, are those flags. I love those flags. And suddenly that space needed that. So I went in and I got the pen back out, drew the little flag thing, and I just painted right over. You can see it was added on top. So, that for me finished it. It needed something in that space, and it also just needed a sense of where I was. Yes, I'm looking at the train station, but I want you to know I'm at Alvera Street.
Right. And that really tells the story too, doesn't it?
It does. That's what it needed. Yes.
Yeah. Cool. Very cool. And so was the paintbrush you're using, is that Dagger?
Most of the time, yeah, I would say this is mostly Dagger. Yeah, I can tell because of where, like in the palm trees, where I'm getting those little pointy shapes. Daggers are really good for that. I think watercolor is by and large a medium of silhouette. So even though you layer with watercolor and, you can do a lot of things with it, but pretty much the silhouette that you lay down, it's what you get.
Right.
So, if you put a clunky shape in there, which I often do, you just have to work with that.
I have to tell you, these live streaming interviews have been very expensive for me because every artist has a different tool, a different technique and everything. I have to try them all. And so I'm ordering all these things, and honestly, it's just been really a lot of fun. So I'm obviously going to have to order a Dagger.
Oh, yes. I highly recommend it. Okay. Now, this is one that I've included. Once again, Alvera Street. Yes, I do sketch other places, but this is my favorite. But the reason I'm showing this one is I've got two versions of this. I actually did something I rarely do, which is I photocopied the black and white drawing, and I did one color version on the original, and then I did another one where I changed the placement. And I like to experiment for myself, but again, this is something that I teach, so I like to be able to show people how you change the story with what you include, what you take out, and the placement. So the placement on the page here is Alvera Street is in the middle of downtown Los Angeles. So even though it's this street that's been here for 200 years or something, it maybe 150, the city has grown around it. So there's the atmosphere of buildings. And so I wanted to see, what if I keep the story mainly about the plaza, but then, I give you a sense of where it is. So I tried a couple of versions of that.
Cool. Shall I click ahead?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so that was one where I actually moved, as you can see, I moved it up. So I felt like now that shadow is from the light fixture becomes almost the star. It just, I thought I got to get that one. Even though I did it really quickly, I tried to make sure that that silhouette was readable.
Yeah.
And I just kind of suggested those buildings in the background. I wanted to use that muted gray, but I wanted you to understand where we are. But for me, the feeling of the plaza, especially on a hot summer day, well, actually that's September. September happens to be our hottest month. So I remember it was a really hot day. Hot days are when I use a lot of yellow, and I use a lot of, my greens tend to be green gold. That's probably what I use more than anything, is as a green gold, and like a rich green gold, or I use the Winsor Newton green gold quite a bit because it's really just a yellow with some green in it.
Right.
And so what it does is it gives you a warm shadow, but then I needed the complement. I needed the purple. And I use a lot of, I love the Daniel Smith Moon Glow, and that gives me, I use that a lot. And I also use lavender. Lavender and Moon Glow is kind of my favorite for shadows. So that also became the background too. And then I tried to reserve white so that the lightest light along the tops of the trees becomes the white.
I'm taking notes.
Good.
Oh, that's wonderful. Shall I click ahead? You
Sure.
know what, Virginia, just boss me around. It's okay.
Okay. All right. So this is the one I did a photocopy, moved it down. You can see that it's kind of a funky paper with that texture so that the granulation went a little nuts. But here's where I wanted to say, what if I bring the scene down? It's always about, composition is sort of the main tool you use when you're telling a story, I think, is what do you want to emphasize? So now I've still got my little shadow in there, but I wanted to really give a sense of, those are really big buildings. And so I kind of pushed the coldness of the gray. I kind of pushed the scale. So, I mean, for me, this was an experiment too, to see
Right.
what do I get with this?
Mm-hmm.
So what's the feeling that I get from this?
Yeah, yeah. Cool. We have a question for you from Suzanne. And
Great.
she's asking, which brand of dagger brush and size would you recommend?
Well, I don't know. I know other people probably make dagger brushes, but what introduced me to dagger brushes was Liz Steele, my friend Liz Steele, and she loves the rosemary daggers. And that's a lady in England named Rosemary, and she has a brush company. And if you're in the US, I think it's Wind River Arts is the distributor, and they're super nice. You can call them up and say, hey, I'd like to order a brush, and they get it right out to you. I personally love the 3/4. That's the one I use most of the time. And I know Liz likes the 1/2 inch. It's a little bit smaller. If I'm going in to do smaller details, I like the smaller one. I sometimes will use a flat also. You know, I use different brushes, but that dagger, since I discovered the dagger, boy, it really is my favorite.
Yeah. Did you want to show your dagger?
I can do that right now. So I would need to switch cameras if I can do that. And I'm going to switch over to the webcam, and hopefully, I don't know.
Okay. Let me fill the screen here. Look at that. Beautiful.
So I don't know if you can see that, but this is my 3/4, which is my favorite. So, and I believe these are part sable and part synthetic. And they got me an inch. When I found out there was an inch, I had to have it. So they ordered that for me from Rosemary, which honestly I don't use quite as much. It's more, but it's great for like a big shape. And then this is the 1/2 inch, this one.
Okay, so the one you were using is mostly the first one that you showed us.
Yeah, so that's my favorite, is the 3/4.
Yeah, and so what are the advantages of a dagger over a round brush?
Well, what I like is that you don't really see it here, but when it's wet,
yeah,
it comes to a beautiful point.
Right.
So I can hold it. It's a lot like a calligraphy tool, you know, because I can, if I want to do a nice fat wash, I can do that. I mean, for years, all I ever used was a round, like a number 12 or number 14 round.
Yeah.
And then I started, you know, I'm going to expand into flats. And my friend Brenda Swenson, some of you may know, gave me this lovely little flat brush. And I use that one sometimes, but I have to say, when I discovered this guy,
That was it. Love at first sight.
although occasionally, if I'm really feeling bold, this one I don't really draw with so much. This is an angle, so it's like the cousin of a dagger.
Right.
And this is made by Princeton Arts Wash. And so, you know, I do like this for doing nice big wash shapes. And yes, you can see I still have some round brushes in my toolkit here.
Are you saying, Virginia, that you can get a better point with a dagger?
Oh yes, because look at the angle.
Yeah.
Well, better than with a round, it depends. You know, if you are using a really good quality round brush, you know, and let's face it, sables will give you, you know, oftentimes the best point and also hold the most. Yes, you can get that lovely point, but I think the bigger the brush is, the bigger the point will be. But with this one, it actually can be fairly precise, but also a little unpredictable. I personally want a little bit of unpredictability in my tools. That's just me.
Yeah.
But what I love is that with a round brush, we're not as apt to just give it a big sweep, you know, or a choppy sort of thing. And I think this just, something about this shape, it's like I said, it's like a calligraphy tool. So I think it just helps you be a little more variable in the shapes that you make.
Cool. Cool.
Yeah.
That's excellent. Thank you.
So while I'm over here, I don't know if anybody wants to take a look at the palette or has any other questions about tools. I don't have a Fude pen handy, but I could run and get one. But I think a lot of you know the Fude pen.
It's a bent nib, right?
Bent nib, right.
Yeah.
And they're inexpensive, which is nice. I love fountain pens, and I have a few that are pretty nice, but boy, my workhorse is really the Fude pen.
Yeah, a lot of artists say that. That's right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for showing us that. MK Buke is telling us that Art Toolkit carries the rosemary dagger at a travel brush, although they're out of stock right now.
Oh, okay. I did not know that. I'm familiar with Wind River Arts. I think perhaps at some time that they were the U.S. distributor, so maybe they have some competition now. I don't know.
Yeah, cool. All right, shall we move ahead to your next?
Sure.
I love this, the granulation there.
Okay. It was a little intense. You know, it was just, I bought some paper that's sort of watercolor grade that you can throw into a printer. So I want to talk a little bit about developing, you know, how you use color. And I am a person that loves to do monochrome, which is different than just black and white, because as soon as I switch to using a color and thinking monochromatically, I'm thinking about how when I'm looking in a landscape or any scene, that the color that I'm looking at is a gradation of colors. There's just a huge range of colors. You're going to see a range of not just values, but sometimes I just need to go back and think, okay, I want to focus simply on the light and shade. And so, you know, I was happy with this drawing because I'm able to restrain myself a little bit more sometimes. In this case, I'm using the Diatramentus Document Brown.
Okay.
And this is not watercolor. This is actually color ink.
Right.
And I use diluted inks and I use water-soluble inks for the washes. And so I know you've interviewed Paul Easton, and I was kind of surprised. I didn't know that he used his inks in water brushes, which is what I do also. So when I'm on location, it's such an easy thing to do. And you can see how you get a little bit of, when the water's added, the color can shift, which I actually enjoy. I like that it went surprisingly a little towards the yellow when I lightened it. But this is like a terracotta ink that is water soluble. So it does these lovely bursts when you add water to it. And so I want the ink line to stay in place. You know, working with a water soluble line is a whole nother art form. for me. I'm happy to have that line sort of hold and then let those washes with the inks do something interesting. So you can see that I did draw, yes, I drew an outline of foliage. I did suggest a lot where when I do that, I really want to make sure that my color doesn't feel constricted by the line. I don't want coloring book. I want to feel like I'm going to break that line and let foliage leave some white space or extend beyond the line. And you can see there's those flags. You'll always see flags at Alvera Street, and that kind of identifies it. So in this case, I wanted to use those as negative shapes.
Cool. Excellent. All right, I'll click to the next one. Ooh, lovely.
Okay. So we have a change of location finally. Here is the Arboretum. And if you ever saw Fantasy Island, or a lot of movies actually, some of the Tarzan movies, some of Jurassic Park, well, that house does not appear in Jurassic Park, but it does appear in Fantasy Island, and that is a Queen Anne house.
Wow.
At the Arboretum. And what I love is it's not a small house. That's a 3-story house. And I love the way it is dwarfed by the trees.
Yeah.
And, I love palm trees. You see them show up a lot. And to me, yes, it's very much a part of Southern California landscape. But this was really an experiment in what can I get with adding one color. So essentially my shadow is a cool gray wash. And again, this is inks. This is a gray ink and just used in layers. And you can see that it tends to, even though it's water soluble, when I lay down another shape on top, like you can see in the lower left, it tends to hold its shape, once it's dry. And then the yellow was the very last thing. I thought, gee, this really needs warmth. It needs that, just that touch of color. So I tried to be just really selective with where I put the color here. So this is, again, this is my dance of line and color where, most of the detail, there's actually some brush pen. You can see some of the bigger, chunkier black shapes are a black waterproof brush pen. And the Fude pen for the line, the more detail line, and then just letting the wash be nice and loose. And that's, to me, the fun of it, is letting color just be really loose.
Cool. Lovely. We have a question for you from Karen Moore. She asks,
Hi, Karen.
She asks, what is the brand of your terracotta water soluble ink?
I'm not sure. I get a lot of samples from Goulet pens, and when I really like a color, it is then I'll order a bottle, but I have to try out those samples first. So I have quite a collection. And Karen is one of our USK sketchers in Los Angeles. So I'm going to find out what color that was, and I can let you know. And I can also give that information to Brenda too.
Okay.
Off the top of my head, I'm not sure, but I remember it was called terracotta. So I will find it.
Very nice. Cool. So here we are in Chinatown.
That's right. Yes. And Chinatown has got an interesting character. It's very, very different from Alvera Street in that it feels like when you go there, you feel like you're walking into the past. I mean, literally, it's kind of past its heyday. It doesn't have this, the feeling of being the center of a community quite in the same way, but it's a fun place to visit. And I will go there in the morning, because it is a little empty. And, you do see a few people walking around, and that looks like a duck, but I think it was a pigeon down in, or might have even been a seagull, I forget. But anyway, there was as many of those as there were people. But this was 3 colors. So again, I did my line sketch really, really quick. This was these were a series of thumbnails. This is actually a little larger. It appears here a little larger than it actually was. And so super quick, I wanted to get that family that was walking through there. And then you can't somehow draw that place without those wonderful vermilion lanterns.
Yeah.
And so I have a friend who goes to paint in Chinatown, and he really avoids that because he wants to paint things that are not obvious. I'm sorry, I'm going for obvious.
Yeah, no, that's the fun part.
I love them. I think they're beautiful. And I really love that red. And if I remember, that is organic vermilion. If I remember right, I think that is organic vermilion, maybe with a little bit of some quinacridone gold kind of mixed into it, just a touch. And then probably two other color, two like a violet and a blue. And so that's really a 3-color painting, which I feel like, again, leaving the white to create the composition, and, you know, just putting in what do I want you to notice. Usually what we notice is detail and contrast and brights. So that bright red orange draws attention to itself. I tried to mute it a bit and use it a little bit in the shadow areas there so that it's related.
Right.
But then you can see, I just think when you're working very simply with just a few colors, you get to really see, oh, look at that. I really can create a sense of depth by where I place those lights and darks. So when I look at the drawing on the left, for me, it tends to be flat, where when I add the tone and color, that's when I start to see depth. And, you know, I notice that my eye just goes bing, bing, bing to the reds. So that's the other thing, is you use color to say, oh, look here, you know, line is starting to hopefully create paths,
Right.
you know, creating direction and paths. And then when you go to color, color is hopefully going to say, but I want you to get the flavor and the feeling of this place. And I want you to see, you know, how the red just becomes this rhythm of these wonderful lanterns that swing across the whole place.
Yeah, yeah. So, you know what I'm hearing again and again in these interviews is artists talking about the limited palette and the benefits of a limited palette, so that it helps you to focus in on what you really want to say and what you think is important in the sketch. And I forget, I think it was Ian Finelli called it a dog's breakfast when you have too many colors all mixed in there.
Oh my gosh, that's so good, because and that's what's funny, is for those of us that love being on location and trying to do things quickly, you're, in a way, you're kind of pushed to making these quick decisions. And so often for me, they're more successful than when I have all the time in the world, because I will get a dog's breakfast very often because I just, oh, well, I could add this and I can add that. And it's like, stop. Better to just, you know, keep it simple sometimes, often.
Just because the color's in the palette doesn't mean you have to use it.
That's right. You know, my 3 colors will change. You know, I often sort of start with 3 colors. So here's where I want to talk about that idea of the dog's breakfast. That's a good one. But, you know, just starting with having to get everything into the scene. And this is another very favorite location of mine, and that's Echo Park. And I guess what I really love in Los Angeles are the old locations, you know, the places that have been in the city for a long time and have a feeling of history. And I don't know how old that bridge is. You're not allowed to walk on it anymore. But the foliage, the trees, you know, a lot of this has just been there for many, many years. And this is another place that I have happy memories of from my childhood. But my first sketch in this location, I have literally cropped this because there was even more going on in the bottom area. And there's a lot here. It got a little heavy for me. It does have the feeling, the place itself does have a little bit of the feeling of a swamp, but I think I kind of pushed that a little far. But oftentimes my first sketch is just trying to get it all in there. And then I have to sit back and go, okay, what if you did another one and you edited it out? So again, this was my first sketch in that particular location. So I have some more here.
No, okay, sorry, is that a hint?
No. Yes. So moving on.
Yeah.
Okay. So I did this little study, and the drawing on the right, again, this is all sitting in the same spot and being selective, a little more selective. And I thought, okay, first one on the right, monochrome. So there is maybe two colors, but very, very related. So essentially that sketch on the right is monochrome. And what I decided to focus on here is, again, where do I want line to describe the story, you know, draw the bridge, the structure, suggest the palm fronds, but there's a lot of background. Again, this is in the middle of a city. It's Echo Park is close to downtown. So there's a
Right.
lot of buildings, there's palm trees in every direction. So I thought I just want to create the sense of there being a background and having that become atmosphere. So the next drawing is the one on the left. And this is what you could call a related palette, right? An analogous palette. So I'm using fairly muted colors, and I'm going with a range of like a warm gold, a yellow gold, and just a little very muted blue and green.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like expanding. So I really did this very consciously as a study. So I could see, you know, what happens if I do this? What happens if I do this? So that was drawing number 2 and number 3, and then there are more. Okay, so this is the drawing I did for the next one. And I wanted to, again, go back to showing you what is it that I'm doing when I do the line drawing. So again, it's often just, it's drawing a map. It's drawing just the basics of the map, where I'm thinking, you know, I want you to have that sense of the vertical and the way the palm tree is going off the page. It's so tall. And I wanted to leave a big area in the foreground white, because I knew that that's where I want to make color decisions.
Okay.
So again, it's like, where do I feel it's important to tell a story, and where do I just want to suggest it?
Right.
So color I use more for the suggestion, I guess you could say, and the emotion.
Mm-hmm. It's really interesting to just see the black and white part, and to think, okay, you have really planned ahead, and you know, like, what you're going to do there, and you've left those spaces on purpose. But I think it's really cool, really interesting.
Well, and I want to also say that was drawing number 4 of that location. So oftentimes, you know, I don't get to that level of editing in the first drawing. I
Right.
often have to do it over and over again. So this was the final of this one. And in this one, I really wanted to get contrast. I really was trying to push a range of, with really warm orangey reds. And some of the foliage there really has that color. What you can sort of see through the structure of the bridge is a lot of flowers in the background.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I wanted that very, very far distant background to be very soft, because that's going to hopefully push that back, that even though it has some warm tones in it, it still hopefully pushes back into the distance.
Cool.
And, you know, again, when you get into an area of the foreground, you think, okay, what do I want to do here? I wanted to definitely get a sense of reflection, but I didn't feel I needed to overstate it. And again, every successful sketch for me has some white space. So, you know, that's what this one was. And I thought this one came up pretty well, but I felt like I still need to do one more. So that's the next one. So this one, if you'll notice, I've composed it differently.
Yeah.
So in this one, I thought, you know, I don't know that I really need a lot of foreground. What if I just bring that down? So having drawn that particular, those 2 palm trees, 5, 6 times, I thought, okay, what do I really need to be ink? I thought, okay, I want some of the texture of the tree, and I want to suggest the structure of the palm fronds. So it's, where are the shadows? Where's the texture? Stop.
Right.
So from there I went to color, And that's the next one. Yeah, so of the grouping, this was the one I thought was the most successful, at least for me. And again, I went back to that related palette, and I felt like this fit the scene for
Right.
me. I didn't feel like I needed every color. I felt like just having just the suggestion of the warm earth colors, sort of a little bit of potter's pink maybe mixed in with some burnt sienna perhaps, you know, just kind of suggesting warm tones, and then letting that background, you know, letting the silhouettes, hopefully trying to make those silhouettes speak for themselves. So that one, you know, it's like, this one worked the best for me just because it was the right balance.
Yes. Well, I can tell I'm talking to a teacher because you're experimenting. And for me personally, I don't like to draw the same thing twice. I just get crazy.
Oh, I totally understand that. And, you know, I cannot draw the same thing twice the same way,
Right.
you know, but I do often, you know, if it's, especially if I am preparing for a class, which is one of the reasons I like to teach, because when you have to figure out, you know, what it is you're trying to get across, and but I like being able to sit in a place that I really enjoy and keep thinking, what do I want to say about this? How can I say it differently?
Mm-hmm.
And so that I like to think that each one builds on something I did before.
Right.
Okay, so this is, I teach workshops at, as I mentioned before, I teach workshops at Descanso Gardens, and this looks like a really sweet little English cottage, and it's really a tool shed, and the bathrooms are actually in that building too. So it looks so romantic, but you know, but anyway, I just thought, once again, you know, where do I want to put the detail? I thought, I got to get the detail in that roof. And I got to suggest the structures. So the fence, the roof line, and then just some suggestion. I'm always thinking, try to always think compositionally, you know, where's a balance of light and shadow, where's a balance of texture and open space. Mm-hmm. So yeah, this was a drawing I did as a preparation for a workshop.
Cool. And there we go.
And so this again, now someone asked a question earlier if I did this all in one sitting. And as I recall, this one, I did the line drawing in the morning. I think I went and had lunch. And then I came back later and sat down and did this. And this was August when I did this. I try to remember to date everything. So in Los Angeles, in late August, we start to see our colors changing. But I have to admit, I push it. You know, I love those sort of warm autumnal colors. So I may have pushed it a little bit. And again, the fun is like, just what can I suggest? And I like that, you know, my foliage absolutely bled onto the roof, which at the time was not an intention. But then I decided I liked it. Yeah. So, you know, it's so easy when you do a line drawing to feel the compulsion to color it in. And I try to fight that, you know, and let colors bleed and let, again, you know, let color do its own thing.
Right. Cool.
So this is one I actually did as a demo at Descanso. And oftentimes what I will do for something like this is I do the line drawing in advance. So I have a few line drawings so that when I go to do a color demo, I can just cut to the chase. You know, and, you know, sometimes I will, like the drawing I showed you for the very first sketch, I did do the line drawing right then and there and then threw on the color. This one I spent a little more time on, same subject. You know, if you've seen the book that I did, you'll see this gazebo in many drawings. I've drawn it many, many, many times, but I like to think it's never the same twice.
Yeah.
So there's always something for me to learn, which is what makes it fun, which is why I like to experiment.
Cool. And there we go. My gosh.
So I remember when I did this one is I was thinking about, okay, what am I going to do with that foreground? And I thought, well, I'm just going to sort of suggest, yes, there's foliage there, and kind of get a little bit of contrast going. And then I thought, I'm going to just really push that foliage back with those deep greens. and a lot of the gazebo was in shadow. So again, it just became, you know, I'm thinking about things like values, light and dark. I'm also thinking here a lot about warm and cool. Okay, so color temperature. To me, there's two really important things to understand about color. One is value, is that colors change a lot with the change of value. And the color harmony has a lot to do with the way we use warm and cool. So I try to make a decision based on what I feel in the landscape. Is it kind of predominantly warm? Or maybe is it more predominantly cool? You know, times of day, the time of year influences that a lot. And I try to think about that as a dance as well, that if I have warm and cool, maybe one is the leader. You know, in this case, I think warm is the leader. The cool is not as dominant here, hopefully. And then again, I felt like when you get that dense with the color, with just blobs and blobs of all that foliage, and you can see I can get very loose and messy, especially when I'm doing a demo sketch, I have to admit, a live demo. And I thought, stop, make sure you leave white. And so again, it becomes, I like to think that the white lets the eye fill in the rest of the story.
Right. Cool. So I think we're going to go to our demo now, right?
Sure.
So before we do that, just to talk to you for a little bit to let you know about what's upcoming interviews. So on August 17th, I'm going to be speaking to Stephen Reddy. And Stephen teaches drawing and illustration at the Gage Academy in Seattle. And he's the author of Everyday Sketching and Drawing and a few other books. And he's got one that was just released last week. And on August 31st, I'm going to be talking to Hazel Sohn, who is really a world-renowned artist. And she's going to be talking about how to paint. She's going to be talking about painting people and wildlife, and calling in and talking to us from her home in South Africa. So I hope that you'll tune into those interviews that are coming up. And also, if you haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe. Click the subscribe button to our YouTube channel. And if you're finding out about this interview at the last minute, maybe it's because you haven't subscribed to the Studio 56 newsletter, so please go there and subscribe to that. Okay, so let me just pull up our demo, and I'm so excited. It's going to be really cool. And we'll go right to it. Oh, and of course we want to talk about your book, Virginia. So 5 Minutes Sketching Landscapes. Do you have another book as well?
Nope, I've been fortunate to be included in a lot of books on urban sketching, but this is the one that I was commissioned to do, and it's part of the series that some of your viewers might know about. I believe there's 4, maybe there's a 5th one now, but this the one I was asked to do was landscapes. So the theme of 5 minutes was, you know, the idea brought to me by the publisher, and you know, people have said, are you telling me that every sketch in that book is 5 minutes, and especially the cover? And I say, no, but I believe the decisions you make in the first 5 minutes, and I do believe you make the most important decisions in the first 5 minutes. That's what sets the whole sketch. You know, the rest of it is, you know, making those decisions along the way, but you make the most important decisions in those first 5 minutes. And there are some 5-minute sketches in that book. And I have 25 contributors. So, okay.
Cool. All right, I'm going to skip through so we can get to your demo.
Okay.
And let's go live.
So like a lot of people, I'm at home quite a bit these days. So there's my palette I'm showing you with my bead trays that I use for paint mixing. That was an idea I got from Brenda Swenson. And here's the line drawing. I think we almost look like we're a little slowed down here somehow.
So you're a lefty.
Oh, I am a lefty.
Yeah.
So in this case, here I'm doing what I tell people not to do, jumping in with detail. But there's a reason for that, is I purposely left some parts of this drawing white because I wanted to suggest background elements just with color.
Mm-hmm.
So I felt it was important to get that silhouette in there.
Yeah. So this is the dagger, the 3/4
That is,
inch
yes.
rosemary dagger.
Mhm.
And it strikes me watching this that those daggers must really hold a lot of paint.
Yes. And I think that is because they're a sable blend. I mean, there's a lot of great synthetic brushes, and I use mainly synthetic brushes, but I do think that's one of the nice features with the dagger is that, at I think a pretty affordable price, it is a blend. And so, yes, it does hold a lot.
Mm-hmm. And you can really see the point.
Yeah, and
On this.
again, it's a big fat brush. And when I'm doing detail, you can see my hand is down there way towards the tip. And when I'm doing a bigger shape, I hold the brush differently. I'm almost holding it like a pen here, I'm noticing.
Yeah, yeah.
It's funny,
Wow.
there's things I didn't notice about how I paint till I actually saw. This was really my first process video, everybody. Okay, so forgive me the
Oh,
lumpiness of it.
no,
So
you
I'm
did a
learning.
wonderful job. And so what is the color that's happening here? Because before you've added this green here, just a moment ago, it started off quite yellow and then it kind of went, it looks like a quin gold.
Yes, I would say that is a blend of a little bit of Hansa yellow and some Quin gold, and then I'm now mixing in a mix of green. And so what I also like is you can sort of see with the palm tree that it's a little fuzzy, but you can see it separating. So some of the warm tone of the quinacridone gold is separating from the green,
Mm-hmm.
which I really like that.
Yeah.
It drives people crazy that I work with drips, but I kind of, if it really is too aggressive, I'll dab it, but usually I leave it alone. So
Yeah.
here you can see how my hand is moved further down on the brush, and I'm using this like a big fat shape tool.
Yeah.
So that's what I love about the versatility of this guy.
And is your sketchbook or whatever you're painting on, is it lying flat or is it tilted?
It is just slightly tilted.
Okay.
I'm using a watercolor easel, and so you're getting a little bit of drip because I have it at a slight angle.
Okay. And so people, if you're watching this and you are bursting with questions, you can send them to me. Find Brenda Murray Facebook page and then send a message through to me and I'll be happy to read it to Virginia. Well, it's really so fun to watch. It's like, I feel like I'm eating a chocolate cake or something. It's just so fun to watch you do the painting. It's just gorgeous. So fun to watch paint dry.
Well, when I do demos, I've had people say, and I cut out some of that. They said, you sort of draw in the air before you attack it with your brush. And I had no idea what they were talking about. And when I did this video, I thought, oh, I do that.
Yeah.
So some of that you might see, or some of it, but a lot of it I tried to edit out. Yeah, I'm doing a little bit of it there, like, okay, where am I going to make this thing land? Oh, there's the dabbing towel. Okay, yes, I do use.
Like you're thinking. You're just thinking, just thinking for a minute, and then you put your brush down.
So like I said, I tried to edit out some of the thinking time because there's not a lot going on the page during those moments. But I do tend to paint fast, but then there's a lot of space in between.
No, this is really cool to watch. So yeah, about the Quin Gold. The thing about Quin Gold is when you're looking at the little palette, the little pastel, it looks like an orange, almost an orangey sienna color. Then when you put a little bit of water on it, you're getting a really light yellow. But if you add any black, even the tiniest dot of black to it, it goes green.
Mm-hmm.
Which I think is always the most bizarre color.
Well, I know some people love quinacridone colors, some people don't. And quinacridone is pretty intense. But that quinacridone gold, I think a lot of people, it's a favorite color, and it's definitely one of mine.
Yeah. And so what are you, Suzanne is asking, what green is this?
Okay, that I also use, I like Daniel Smith's Undersea Green. It is a mixed green, and it's very dark and it's very warm, but I've also mixed a little bit of another green into it, probably a little bit of green gold. And I also mix some blue into it. I mix like a very cool blue into it, but it's a lot like that I'm doing now is mostly a little bit of indigo and undersea green.
Okay, really interesting. Yeah, and maybe, you know, I should probably ask about the paper because, you know, when people are trying to learn from another artist, they can sometimes be frustrated if they're not working with the exact same materials. You're not going to get really the same results. So, what is this, a hot press, a cold press? What kind of paper do you prefer?
Okay, I use all different papers, but most of the time when I'm using Fude pen, and I do pencil drawings as well, believe it or not. I love pencil, but usually when I'm thinking about this line and color theme, I want that line to be very strong and, you know, confident looking. So that's when I use the ink line. But I'm using a hot press watercolor paper here.
You know the brand? Do you remember?
Actually, I have the painting right here. I think that was, let me see. I think that one is it's either a Winsor Newton or an Arches hot press paper.
Mm-hmm.
So it has, I would describe it as a velvety surface.
Okay, right.
So it's not super smooth, but it's, you know, I will use sometimes a cold press, but you get a really, really bumpy line, which, you know, isn't all bad. But most of the time when I'm using an ink, and if I'm not using a sketchbook, I'll use a hot press watercolor block, which I'm using here.
Okay, okay. And you know, I have to say this, it's really your style of sketching, your drawing is reminding me so much of a Calvin and Hobbes cartoon.
You know, you are not the first person to say that. And I love Calvin. I mean, there was no intention there, but I mean, I love Calvin and Hobbes, and that's, you know, besides just the feeling of those characters, because I did work as a character designer, so it's there.
Yeah.
But I mean, gosh, I always loved his line quality, and you know, it may be, and I don't know how old the artist is, but I grew up on seeing the great illustrators, you know, especially of like the 60s, you know, in 50s, 60s, 70s. And there were so many great magazine illustrators who had gorgeous ink line. And that's, you know, as much as I have my fine art training and I love many fine artists, I grew up on the great illustrators who were fabulous ink artists as well. So
yeah. Well, I mean, you're obviously, it's your line quality, I think, primarily, but I think even in his color, some of his color comic books is also really similar. And, but I think it has to do with your Fude and the way you use your pen and so on.
I take that as a great compliment.
Good.
Yeah.
Good. Well, it was meant to be a compliment because I mean it's another form of art and it's beautiful.
Oh, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Cool. Very nice.
Now this is where you're going to see a lot of white space because I felt like I want things like doorways. When you see the photo of this house, it's just ridiculously complicated. There's more stuff going on in that yard than you can believe. And, you know, I've never felt the need to draw the entire...
the whole thing.
Right, exactly.
And are you using loose sheets of paper or a sketch pad?
This is a block.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's a block because, you know, I work very, very wet. And so I either use watercolor sketchbooks that have pretty heavy paper, or I use a watercolor block.
Mm-hmm. It's just fascinating to watch even just how you handle the brush and how you use the brush. For me, really interesting.
Well, for me, the pleasure of doing this is being kind of free and loose. You know, I mean, this for me is actually kind of a tight sketch. I mean, by the time I finish this one, I'll be honest, not my favorite because I think I really overdid it. But it, you know, at least initially as I started this, it feels good to just be kind of loose, let the edges, try to make the edges kind of interesting, you know, be judicious about where you blend, and then, you know, let some of those edges just be there.
Mm-hmm.
Even if they're kind of loose and choppy. Ah, there's the freeway. I just thought, do I put the freeway in or not? Ah, yes, I'll put the freeway in. So, okay, there's the freeway. I've got to make the freeway continue up here. Yes, behind.
Oh, I see. Right, right, right.
Yes,
Cool.
that
So,
freeway is right above that house.
yeah. So, Virginia, in your bio, we were talking, I was read out to people that you worked as a concept and character designer for toys and entertainment. And I'm just wondering if that previous work has informed your sketches in any way.
You know, that's such a good question. And I always thought they were totally separate. And now I think, no, not really.
Okay.
You know, I mean, when I did that kind of work, I worked mainly with pencil and marker. And then when Photoshop kind of came in, I would do color work with Photoshop. But I found that it's a lot of the same thinking. I mean, you know, and what I've done for the last, 12 years and just retired from is teaching drawing to toy designers at Otis College. So I find that I tell them the same things that I'm telling people on location as far as just the thinking, you know, the thinking of how you compose a drawing, you know, how you make someone pay attention to what you want them to see.
Yeah.
So in so many ways, it's not as different as I used to think.
Okay, cool.
And that was kind of a on-the-spot decision that I made to say, okay, I'm going to throw that other silhouette up there with those trees and those buildings.
Mm-hmm. And so are you retired now, Virginia, or are you?
Well, I decided, you know, long before the pandemic that last semester was going to be my final semester at Otis, you know, officially, that, you know, I've been asked, you know, you're going to come in and do workshops, right? And I said, sure. But, you know, everything has changed right now.
Yeah.
So who knows when that might be. I finished my semester teaching on Zoom, as most of us did.
Yeah.
And so I really, my goal with leaving Otis, which I loved doing that, was to devote more time to workshops. So that is something I want to do in the future. So I've just introduced some cool colors. This is the first time I've really brought cool into this, but it's a very muted cool.
Mm-hmm.
And that shadow, you know, I think shapes of shadows are so important. So I wanted to get that strong shadow shape of the telephone pole. I like to think in my little universe of the front yard, which is where I do most of my painting these days, is I have favorite characters, and the stop sign, my car, that's my car on the right, that big tree, the trash cans. Those people usually leave their trash cans out most of the week, which I love because I like drawing them. You know, I have favorite characters, but sometimes the stop sign will be the star, and sometimes the telephone pole becomes important, or the light, you know, or the trash cans. So in this sketch, it suffers a little bit from trying to get too much. So I know that what I want to do, I've done a couple of sketches of this scene, but I think what I want to do with the next one, and there will be a next one, is how can I really simplify? How can I be more selective?
Yeah. It's so informative to be able
That
to
was the car I just painted there, just so you know.
Yeah. It's so informative to just be able to sit and just watch, you know, quietly as you work through this painting, because you're approaching this topic in your painting style and everything is completely different from how I would do it, and maybe from how most of our viewers would as well. So You know, I think you just watching someone else work, you can really learn a lot. It's fascinating to watch. You know, where you start, where you're going to put your brush next, how you treat the shadows and the details and so on. So it's fascinating.
Well, you know, a question that I'm often asked is, where do you start? Or what do you start with? And I don't have a stock answer for that, honestly. If I were going to make the sky an important element, and I do paint the sky in this one, but I really start with what's most important for me in the scene. And as you can see, I wanted to make sure I got that silhouette, and those trees were kind of golden in that particular light. And so that's why I started with that color, as once I established that silhouette up at the top right, I felt, okay, now it's important to me to get in where that gold is in the rest of the scene. So for me, the shadows came later, which is unusual. Usually I will get the shadows in a lot sooner. But, you know, here's where you're starting to see, and that blue is a lot brighter in the video than it was in real life. It's kind of funny. I think the camera likes blue.
Yeah.
So you can see I'm kind of painting around a bit, and I'm keeping the treatment of the sky pretty light.
I think those the far background trees, the palm trees on the right and the highway on the left, really helps to show that this is an area that's really hilly. And,
yes.
And if you didn't paint those in there, we wouldn't really know that.
That's what's characteristic. When I first started in Urban Sketchers and I became an Urban Sketcher correspondent, that's what I painted more than anything, is the landscape of my city. And where I live in Northeast Los Angeles, and I live in hills, you know, and I live in a slight valley. And so, yeah, everywhere you look, you do see these sort of scrubby hills. And, you know, they have about a month during the year where they're green, but the rest of the time they're pretty scrubby, but they're a particular sort of greenish gold. And that's just the characteristic of, and there's foliage, there's trees everywhere. And I think when people come from other places, that's something that they're really struck by, is you have trees everywhere here. Yes, you do.
Oh, that's cool. So MK is saying that the most important concept that she's learning is how you draw the background with a brush and color, and it pushes those shapes back in atmospheric perspective rather than drawing in the background with an ink line.
Thank you. You know, I don't do that 100% of the time, but especially, you know, if more and more, that is what I do. And it's because I'm aware that the line is going to draw your attention because of the contrast and because of the detail. And so it just works better for me to put that in the foreground. And even though, you know, the elements under, you know, those windows, the trees, those are pretty dark, and they're pretty in real life, you know, there's a lot of detail there. I felt like I didn't want them to fight with what I like particularly in the scene. It was the detail of the foliage and my stop signs and the trash cans. So, you know, some things have to sit back. You know, not everybody gets to be the star in every scene. You have to have some people be the supporting players.
Yeah, cool.
So here I am finally going in for the darks. I always think of when I go in with really the darks, I'm going in for the kill, you know, and for me, that's where the scene starts to be finished. And then it's always, okay, how much dark do I need? Where do I want to put it?
Yeah. I find it sometimes really surprising when you're saving the darks until last. And you think, okay, I'll just put a little bit of dark. You put some dark in, you realize, oh, whoa, that is not even close to how dark it actually is. I always get surprised by that.
Oh, absolutely. And again, it's a decision, is do you need, you know, I think a good sketch usually, not always, but usually has a good range of values. But going as dark as the actual scene, you can lose a lot that way. I mean, maybe you want some feeling of light and reflection and just some nice color shapes. So you kind of have to let some things be a little bit lighter.
Yeah.
I think we're being true to the scene, but we're being selective, and we're being, you know, we have an editing eye. And I think that's a successful sketch, has a feeling of being edited, or feeling like the artist has said, here's what I want you to notice. And the other things are really just to support the story.
Yeah, yeah. Cool.
And like I said, for me, this one, I went a little too far, but oh well, you know, I don't get as discouraged by that as I used to. I just think you can do another one.
Yeah. Well, no, I think it's just fantastic. It's just gorgeous. Lovely. Really, really interesting. I think we learn so much from watching others, because you're watching how they apply the paint and everything else, but you're also participating. You're really aware of their thinking process.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, that are being made. So cool. And I think we're coming to the end of it too.
Yes. Yeah, that's as far. I mean, this one gets to about 3/4 finished. And frankly, I just wish I hadn't done too much more after this, but you know, I kind of kept going after the video stopped.
We have only a few more seconds. And so you've given me, you've shared with us the final image, right?
Yes.
Okay, we'll click on that and as soon as this is finished. There we go. Okay, so
Yep.
this is the final.
Yep.
Beautiful. Yep.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I kind of went a little nuts, and then, you know, sometimes I feel like, oh, I just got to get in a little bit of weight. So I got out my white gouache and I splashed a little street texture, added the line around the stop sign, you know, added just a little bit of white here and there, which, did I really need that? Probably not. But, you know, sometimes I do keep going.
Yeah. You know what I really noticed here that I think you must have added at the end is all the little dots to help indicate the leaves on that big tree.
Right.
And, you know, that's the dance of line and color that we were talking about before, where you sort of suggested the foliage in the ink, but then you really went in and added a lot with the paint.
Thank you. Yeah, that's how I like to do it.
Mm-hmm. Very cool.
I think I could have left the ink line completely off the top of that tree. So I think that's what I'll do next time.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, you could. It looks gorgeous. It looks fantastic. I mean, I love it, love it, love it very much.
Well, thank you.
Mm-hmm. It's lovely. Well, thank you so much, Virginia.
My pleasure.
Thank you so much, Virginia. We really appreciate you spending the time with us and sharing your beautiful art. Gosh, we learned so much and we really appreciate it. I mean, I just love that dance of line and color, and I think I'm gonna have to change how I do some things now.
Play with it.
Yeah, that's the fun thing.
It's all an experiment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So everyone, thank you so much for tuning to our little chat today, and thank you for
so much, everybody.
Virginia, do you have any closing words you'd like to share with people?
I think what I kind of just said is, I think take the attitude that every sketch is an experiment, and then, you know, there is no failure, because if something doesn't come out the way you're happy with it, or it's not how you expected, you try another one. You know, you say, well, what can I learn from that? What would I do differently? And I'll do the next one differently. Yeah. So, you know,
just play, just have fun.
Just play.
Yeah, super. Thanks, everyone. And I hope to see you in a couple of weeks with my Stephen Reddy interview. And if not, maybe we'll see you at the end of the month when I'll be chatting with Hazel Sohn. Take care, everyone. Be safe. Take care of yourselves. And we'll see you next time. Okay. Bye. Bye, Virginia.
Bye-bye. Thank you.